Today we're with Carlie Lee, who is archivist and historian.
Yes, sir.
Very good. And we're going to talk about what she does in a moment. Please tell us about yourself.
So I'm Carlie Lee. I am the archivist and historian here at the Carolina Museum of the Marine Corps. I am also a National Guardsman. I am an officer. I'm a 91 Alpha over in Kinston, North Carolina. I graduated class of 2023 from the Virginia Military Institute with a Bachelor's of Arts in History and a concentration in military history. And I recently just got accepted to the Master's of Arts in Museum Studies at Johns Hopkins. Just kind of continuing to learn more about the museum world and hopefully one day get my PhD and just kind of always continue to learn.
That's good to hear. Now, you gave I think it was an alphanumeric designation for what you do. Does the Army have an MOS?
Yes. So
Is that what they call it? MOS?
They call it your branch.
Okay.
So when we speak of, you can also call it an MOS, but we designate it as, this is your particular branch. So 91 Alpha is a maintenance and munitions officer. So that falls under the logistics kind of wheelhouse. But the Army is such a vast universe that I'm a maintenance officer, but I'm actually the distribution platoon leader for my company. So I'm in charge of moving goods through convoys.
Well, you're in good company here because we have logistics type people all over the place. Yeah, that's really good.
We need logistics.
And VMI. Now, I asked you wrongly if I was in Stanton, but it's in Lexington.
Yes, sir.
Weren't there some really sort of illustrious faculty members there over the history of the school?
So Stonewall Jackson is kind of the big one that everyone talks about. He was a professor. He was a professor of artillery and things of that nature, as well as natural, I believe, philosophy. Correct me if I'm wrong. Back before the Civil War, he was a professor there. The VMI museum system actually holds 3 museums. It's the VMI museum that's on campus. The Stonewall Jackson House, which is in downtown Lexington, is where he stayed while he was a professor, and then also the Virginia Museum of the Civil War up in Newmarket, Virginia. But we've had many illustrious alumni, General George C. Marshall. You have people like our former Superintendent General P, which is 4-star general. Just a lot of successful people, just not just in the military, but doctors, lawyers. We've had Rhodes Scholars. We had a gentleman named Jonathan Daniels. He was a civil rights activist. He's a patron saint now.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. He was killed protecting a young African-American woman down in Alabama. So.
Are you from Virginia?
Yes, sir.
What part? So
originally from a small county called New Kent County, but I moved to Williamsburg when I was in high school.
Excuse me. Yeah, I'm from Prince George County.
Okay, yes, sir. I've been there many times going hunting.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Prince George and Waverly.
Now, it's flat enough there that you can't use a rifle, right?
I did more crossbow because I.
Oh, really?
So I was my dad.
I've
been shooting guns since I was 4 years old, but picked up crossbow in middle school. I thought I was like, this is kind of like a fun combination of things. So.
Yes, well, those of us who are from Virginia understand well the storied history of your alma mater.
That's one of the reasons when I only applied to VMI. I only applied to one school.
Really?
I was looking at VMI and I was looking at the Citadel, and the timelines of applications were kind of weird. And I was like, you know what? And I was like, VMI, state pride, Virginia.
Sure.
I love Virginia.
Yeah.
And just looking at the history, I was like, VMI is just, so different compared to the Citadel. When you say the Citadel and VMI, there's a diffent connotation to it. There's a different weight behind
There really is, yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I wanted to be in the military. I had made that decision up, I believe, sophomore year of high school. I was like, if I don't get into VMI, I was like, it's a sign. I was like, I'm going to go enlist. So that was my only backup plan. And VMI picked me, and it was a chaotic 4 years because of COVID and everything, but it was, I wouldn't trade that experience because, like, you went to a military college, a normal college experience. I was like, your college experience is like most other people. My college experience, I can only explain to people that went to VMI. They're the ones that are going to get it.
Right, sure.
And we just have that kind of communal bond that, through shared suffering creates brotherhood is kind of like our tagline. And that couldn't be any farther from the truth because no one else understands it. Right. I can sit here and say our weird phrases like being a rat, and to most people they're like, I'll get a pet rat. But to myself, my friends, our community, it means something different.
Right, yeah.
So,
Well, now, when you applied, how long did you have to wait before you heard?
so I'm an overachiever, and the application portal opened, I believe, like 2 September. I had my full application in by 12 September, and I had to wait until December.
Oh.
And I was frantic. Anytime someone mentioned VMI, like just a 3-letter, ran and found the closest like piece of wood I could knock on. I was like, because it just meant so much. I had done, the open houses that they do. They do a great open house where you actually get to spend the night. And I was like, I don't want to go anywhere else. I don't want to do anything else. I want to go here. So
it was a good day when you got the good news.
Well, the traditional VMI thing, when you get in, you get this big red folder. And I knew about the red folder. And I didn't get the red folder. And I had this little envelope, and I freaked out. But because I was early decision, every early decision person from my class didn't get the big red letter. They got the little one, and then later on.
Oh,
so I was freaking out when I walked inside.
You thought, this is a turn down.
I was like, and I opened it up, and it was congratulations. And I dropped to the floor. It's like, this is one of the greatest days of my life.
Yeah. When I got the word that I'd been accepted into my program at UVA, I thought, man, this is great. Yeah. And so now you're an aging archivist.
I'll take it.
Okay, please describe to us what you do here.
So an archivist when you think of an archivist, you think more of documents, newspapers, photographs, journals, things of that nature. But my title doesn't really, my title's a bit broader than that. I also am the collections manager. Mm-hmm. So I also, our collection, before we can put it in the museum, we have it housed in 3.5 storage units. So myself and other people, the curatorial staff, we're working on organizing it and managing it. I'm also the main person that runs Past Perfect 5, which is our collections database. So I not only do the archivist side with, the paper documents, but I'm also that person that is working on the artifacts as well. And the historian, most people, when you think of a historian, you think of the person that's like that subject matter expert.
Yeah, you're reading old documents and figuring it out.
I would love to be again, doctor, historian one day. But historian in this sense of the term is I'm helping other members of the curatorial staff do the research to put the artifacts to a story and to make the exhibits. Because when you have an exhibit, you have the artifact and you have the story. You need to put the story together. You need to make sure the historical context makes sense. You need to make sure that you're not this uniform isn't from World War II, it's from Korea.
Now, are you talking about this thing called provenance?
Yes, sir. So the provenance is also something different. Provenance is the legal document that authorizes. So,
oh, really?
Say I want to give you, this plant, but this plant I'm giving it to you in a donation. You can keep it forever and always and do whatever you want with it. When you have no more use for it, there's sometimes on provenance, I check yes to you selling it, to you giving it to other museums, to you even possibly throwing it away. So I sign over that legal right so that in 20 years, my grandchild doesn't want to come find you guys and be like, well, that was, my family, I want it back. Well, here's the legal document. We also get things like gifts, and you also get loans. So I'm loaning this to you because I know that you can do something greater with it than it's sitting in my attic, but in 10 years, I would like it back.
Right,
so provenance is that legal document that allows a museum to do what they need to do with that said artifact or whatever.
And so it demonstrates to everybody that this is what we say it is.
Yes. So when someone comes back and is like, I want this back, or it's mine and you're not allowed to have it, this is the legal paperwork that we are authorized to have it. And that's, a big thing that was happening with like Indigenous Americans in the museums. They had all these, artifacts, and they're like, we never gave you, you just took them.
Oh, wow.
So then that's there was a big resurgence in the early 2000s where, Indigenous tribes were like, you never got permission from us to have these sacred items. You just dug them up in archaeological digs and kept them. We want them back. You have no paperwork. So that provenance is such an important part of what I do, because that allows me to be like, okay, we have this. You guys can put this on exhibit because it's ours. Got it. If this isn't ours, we can't put it out because someone's gonna and that's also a way you get accredited with the American Alliance of Museums, which is AM, and each state has their own one, like North Carolina Museum Council. That's how you can get credibility as a museum, that you have the paperwork, that you know what you're doing.
Okay, so we're about to build a museum. Mm-hmm. And we have people working on the exhibit design and all that sort of thing. Now, it's all set up. The doors are open. Mm-hmm. is it static after that, or does it change?
For like my position?
What I mean is, like, you walk into the museum and you look around and you see all of these exhibits and you see all this stuff. It's gonna look that way forever.
So that's the interesting thing, is depending, some museums, it is that way. They have the same exhibit space for 20 years and they don't change. That's something, actually my senior thesis in college I did it on the history and the changing of museums. And I actually used the VMI museum that I worked at as kind of like a case study. And that's something, that some people want to keep it the same because they did it right the first time. They don't want to change it. Other people see the importance of changing and see, yesterday was history to some people, but for other people, 20 years ago is when history started.
Right.
So it kind of also depends on the museum climate and the people that work in the museum and the people that kind of get to make those decisions. But something that you can also do to counteract that is you have special exhibits. So, Marine Corps birthdays coming up, we're going to do an exhibit on the history of Marine Corps birthday celebrations, or this person's, General Gray's birthday is coming up, or, something of that nature. You could do special exhibits that are for, I did an exhibit on Pearl Harbor.
You've kind of answered the question I wanted to ask, which is this. What if, we've been in operation for 5 years and somebody offers us something totally great? What do we do?
So that's, again, something, you always have the ability to change. And that's, up to, powers that be and people that make those decisions. But, there's other ways around it where you can do like special collections and special exhibits. But that's also the great thing about this community is people really appreciate this history. So this museum, we have cases over Marine Corps University. We have cases, in the airport, and people want to learn things. So you might have something that you might not necessarily have room for in the museum, or it's not working, physically and visually.
Oh, so you find some public space to put it.
We have exhibit spaces in the museum, or in Marine Corps University. I believe there's like 12 cases. And I actually did an exhibit there with Miss Lisa Potts when I first started volunteering here. We did one about World War II uniforms. And it's cool because we have these Marines coming up to us, these E8s, E9s that are just like, wow, I didn't know that. That's so cool. And they're on their way to their classes or their graduation or what have you. And they just get to stop on their lunch break and be like, huh, I've been in the Marine Corps 20 years. I didn't know that. That's so cool.
So would you say, I'm sorry, please.
In the community, the same way. You have something in the airport. Someone, retired Marine Corps vet, or just someone that's lived in the area that didn't know that particular thing about, the connection that the Marine Corps had with this area. And it's just always that's what I love history. You can always learn something new.
So would you say a museum can be a public service that does more than commemorating a particular thing?
Absolutely. My thing is, that's another reason why I still joined the military, is you have that connection with people and you don't know about that connection until you learn. And that's something a museum does, is it lessens that barrier that we have. Your personal history is different than my personal history, our heritage, our family, but we have something that connects us all. We have, we're Americans, we live here in North Carolina, we're humans in general. And I think history can start to blend together communities and blend together people, because you go to an exhibit and you're like, oh, that's, I didn't know that. I'm proud of that. And that's a person you've never met, or a family you've never met, or something you didn't know. And I think it's a catalyst for change. If we're just going to pull out the big guns, I think history can really, bring, in some cases it separates people. That's everything, people take it different ways, but I think history really has an impact to, bring communities together.
Often when we wrap up a conversation with someone, we ask a question like, how do you think, what we're doing here could be of service to others, and even those who haven't served in the military? And you have just given a brilliant answer to that question, but go ahead.
I think, as someone that's kind of in the military, weekend warriors, it gives another appreciation for what people do, because not a lot of what civilians, I only have, both of my grandfathers are in the military and my cousin. So most of my family has no idea kind of, what I do as, National Guardsman, but just, people, my husband's an active duty Marine. And it's cool because they get to kind of see it from a more deep, like from our lens.
Right.
This museum is taking the Marine story from Marines and putting it into context. And yes, Gallery 2 talks about the community and how vital the community is, but it's I think it's going to make a difference for people to see it the way that we see it. You know, when I go to schoolhouses and I explain it to people, they're like, oh, that makes more sense now that you took the time and now I can appreciate what you do more. I think the museum is going to do that for people not in the military, people that might not understand, like, you know, Army and Marine Corps, United States military, but we're vastly different. And I get to see it, you know, from the Marines' eye and from the Marines' point of view of how, you know, this impacted their life and how, you know, what the Marine Corps taught them made them such an important member in society. And I think it's just really nice. Instead of the history books, which are written by historians or by what have you, you get to see it from a Marine's point of view, which I think that is invaluable because, you know, not a lot of people sit down anymore and talk.
That, you know, if we had another hour, I'd like to talk about that very thing. It's definitely true that conversation is perhaps a dying art, but it's a very, very important
Absolutely.
one. But you also hit on something that I think is important, and that is, yes, historians write books, and we're commemorating Marines and sailors who wrote history with what they did.
Exactly.
And then I guess your people who do what you do document that.
Mm-hmm. We, you know, that's something, you know, that sitting down in the artifacts tell a story. And that's, you know, my favorite part about this job is I get to sit and play isn't the correct term that I would like to use, but I get to sit there and just, you know, I go home and I'm like, wow, I touched the sands of Iwo Jima today from the 1940s.
Sure, yeah.
I'm touching the stories. I'm touching the things that create the stories that I'm listening here today. I'm touching the uniform that this man wore when he was landing, you know, on Okinawa. And it's the physicality along with the story, I think, just creates just such a dynamic thing where, you know, I love sitting down and reading books. Books are great. But when you get to hear it from the person, you get to feel it and understand it, and you get the rest of those five senses all conjoined, it's just something that's truly magical. Like, I've literally gone home, talked to my husband, I was like, I got to touch this, and I just am so honored that this is my job, that I get to do this for a living, that I get to connect these pieces together so that people can feel the same way that I feel.
So apparently you have interesting work.
I would not change anything. I love it. I've loved history since I was in the 5th grade. Elementary school, my parents were like, where do you want to go on vacation? I want to go to the museum. I don't want to go to the amusement park. I don't want to go to the beach. I want to go to the museum. What do you want for your birthday? Can you get me this like 500-page history book from the bookstore? And I love it, and I want people to love it as much as I do, and I want people to appreciate it because it's not something that we have every day. You know, my grandfather was a World War II vet. He never wanted to talk about it, ever. I think some things happened and it made him uncomfortable. So getting to sit down with veterans and hear their stories, it's kind of like familial. And I really appreciate the ability to do that. You know, I've been able to get to do some great things. I went to a veterans conference in Washington, D.C., and I got to sit down and I have a video of me dancing with a young man from World War II in his wheelchair, and he was the most lively person I could have ever met. And it's the biggest way I can describe it as an honor to just do what I do and meet the people that I meet and learn the things that I learn on a daily basis. Well,
you have a very admirably analytic approach to what you do.
Yes.
And that's good. And, you know, we're larger than we used to be, and we're still small.
Yeah.
But boy, I occasionally talk with Ashley, my wife, who's nearby as we speak, and talk about how, as small as we are as an organization, the skill set we have across the people we have is wonderful.
And that, again, you have to think, you know, General Stewart, you know, 1-star general, he's had numerous leadership opportunities. Same thing with Sergeant Major, same thing with Miss Lisa, CW05. They call them unicorns for a reason. They're just so skilled, and now we're bringing, you know, we have the civilian aspect too. Because again, the military isn't run by generals, they're run by civilians.
Right.
They keep us in line because we can go off and go do things that don't make sense. And the civilians, they're so crucial because I can list off 17 acronyms and you're going to sit there and be like, what are you talking about?
What in the world?
And so the civilians, you know, Miss Ashley, Sarah, Kristen, you know, I'm half and half. it's so vital to have a combination of military and civilians because we keep each other aligned and we keep on that mission from both sides.
Yes, and as we mentioned when we were talking with Kristen Honecker, it's kind of good to sort of up our liberal arts game.
Yes, yes.
Well, Carlie Lee,
Yes, sir.
welcome.
Thank you, sir.
And we're glad to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.